brief outline of the report, but I'll walk you through quickly so that we don't miss the part of discussion. So we'll discuss the purpose, objective, audience of the report, the content, and then we'll get to the most important part on the data challenges. The purpose of this report, or should I say that, as the chair said, agriculture employs about 65% of its labor in agriculture, and that translates to about 2% of GDP. So therefore it is undeniable that agriculture is very important for developing economies in sub-Saharan Africa. And therefore, the purpose was to provide a one-stop shop for reliable and readily accessible resources, current data that will inform the status of agriculture in sub-Saharan Africa. The objectives of the report was to assess the current status of agriculture in Africa so that we know where we are coming from, that we will be able to measure where we are going and the gains that we're making. Also, to monitor key agriculture indicators that will inform the performance in this very important sector. Also, to analyze trends in agriculture so that we'll be able to report and compare ourselves with other economies in other regions. In addition, it is also meant to identify potential areas of investments. Should somebody approach your organization, you will be able to say, this is where the gaps are, this is where we need assistance. And of course, identify gaps in agricultural data so that areas that don't receive enough focus, we can start focusing on them. And of course, share the data with stakeholders as well as build partnerships. The audience of the report were everybody in this room, government agencies, NGOs, development practitioners, research institutions, university students, our farmers, of course, and other stakeholders. The report followed a value chain approach, and that's the way agro works, in a value chain approach. We believe in good seeds, good soils will increase production, and therefore connecting farmers to the market. That's what we believe in, and that's what the format of the report follows. Also, we had enabling environment, because for you to be able to do this, you need policies that enable farmers to acquire seeds and fertilizers. We also had capacity building that focused on training in agriculture topics, as well as farm organizations and extension advisory services and gender and cattle crops. So for the report, we intention to have macro data at national level and micro data at household level. So our intention was to have 10 years, as I earlier mentioned, so that we can show trends and progress. So the sources of data for the macro data was the World Bank, or the big organizations who targeted their databases, FAO-STAT, IFRI, UNESCO, OECD, and such organizations. For this should be micro. For micro level, we now intention and deliberately went to several countries with the intention of collecting micro data. And this is data that would have been collected using the Agricultural Household Service, National Agricultural Censuses, and of course specific agricultural surveys. That would mean if a country has, for example, conducted, say, outcome panel data, they would have that available for us, and of course, case studies. So, my colleagues and I, as I said, set out to most of these, the countries of focus, with the intention of collecting the data. And what we found was a little shocking for us because it was challenging as well. As you can see from this table, very few countries have conducted agriculture censuses. And let me back up a little bit and say that we had come up with specific indicators in agriculture that we were interested in. And some of them were, number of households that are in farming, land sizes, and that sort of thing. So some of the data would have been informed by agriculture censuses. But as you can see from this table, very few countries have conducted agriculture censuses. That was the first tranche, which was to run from 1996 to 2005, and only those few countries. Now the next was to run from 2005 to 2015. So by next year, we would expect that most countries will have done their censuses. And you can see some countries, and I'll pick Kenya because that I'm very familiar with, they haven't done an agriculture census, neither do they conduct agriculture surveys. But every time you turn on the TV, there is always something on agriculture, so it begs the question, where do they get the data to support whatever they say? So, in most of these countries that we went to, and I have to say that we visited the Ministries of Agriculture, and as well as the National Statistical Offices, to access the data was a little difficult. Partly because in cases where surveys had been done, the analyses had not been conducted or they were partially analyzed. In some cases, data entry had not even been done, and this is maybe a year or a year and a half after the data collection. The data storage was also a challenge because they didn't have, most countries didn't have centralized databases, so you would have to move from somebody's laptop to another one, and if the person is not there, you would have to come back the following day to get the data. So it would have helped if everything was at least centralized, so it would have been sort of a one-stop shop for that kind of business. The data quality also, once we got the data and took back, we were trying to analyze, there were instances where the data on the same indicator was different. If you were tracking, say, the sizes of land, and you got the data from the National Statistical Office, the number would differ from what the Ministry of Agriculture had. So in such a situation, which one did you pick? Which one would speak for the country? That was a challenge. Also, when it came to the questionnaires, if a country had done a questionnaire, say, a survey in 2001, and the next one 2005, and then 2010, the question, and just to give an example, say labor, the question in the first survey, perhaps they track the time spent in individual agriculture work. For example, how the time you spend in harvesting or weeding and that sort of thing. The second questionnaire would probably be, do you work in agriculture? Are you employed in agriculture? So it changes. So even within the same country, if you wanted to compare the change from the 2001 survey to the 2005, that would not have been possible to do so. We didn't use most of that data. And then in some cases, the unit of measurement changes. In the one questionnaire, it would be percentage, the next one it would be absolute number. And so to compare within the same country or across countries, that's also a challenge. And then of course, what is measured? Is it access or use? So one country is measuring or tracking access, another one is use. So you cannot compare the data. And this is just to give you a graphic experience of what we found. In the first case, the very first picture right at the top, after the survey was done, the questionnaires were put in a room, and they had not even, data has not been entered. And so in this case, if there were questions or follow-up in the field, that would be very difficult to happen. Because over time, people forget, nobody remembers, and then you question the reliability of the data because when you don't do it right away, you can address the issues. The next one, the same case, they were arranged nicely, at least better than the first case, but still not where we need to be. But the bottom picture, perhaps that's where we should all aspire to be. Once the survey is done, data is entered and cleaned, and so it is stored in a fashion that people can access and use. So lessons learned from this exercise is that agriculture data is not at the same level of priority in the different countries. You remember the table I just showed, and you've got that table from AfrEA. Some countries have done their agriculture censuses, others have not. Others conduct agriculture surveys on a regular basis, others don't. So, and that perhaps that was streamlined, maybe we would be in a better place. And of course, the National Statistical Offices and the Ministries of Agriculture do not coordinate with each other. And in some cases, they don't even talk to each other. So each institution has different data, but on agriculture. Then, of course, the use of data for planning is weak, because if no one is using the data that's being analyzed, or the survey has been done, but data has not been entered. So obviously, the policymakers are not using adequate data or current data to make the decisions that they need to. And of course, the timing of the data collection is important. You don't wait until the farmers have forgotten, what they spent, and then that's when they're going to ask for information, because recall, that may be a challenge as well. So, after outlining all the challenges, here are some of the strategies we think would address these issues. Governments should make a deliberate effort to fund data collection. And they should also request maybe assistance from private sector, donors. And if they all partner together, I think that would be very powerful. We might be able to move ourselves from where we are to the next level. Encourage the collaboration between Ministries of Agriculture and National Statistical Offices to talk to each other a little bit more, decide who speaks to the data, and for the country, who is responsible for it. Because then when people go in, you don't have to keep tackling from one ministry to another ministry trying to get the data. The data accessibility, that's very important. Data may be available, but you cannot access it. In one country, we were informed that we had to pay for data, but that was much later. When we visited, there was no mention of we're going to sell this data to you. So even if the data is going to be sold, at least upfront, then you know that it's going to happen, you plan for it, and then it has to be quality data that's reliable, that will inform on the issues that we're looking to work towards. Also encourage open data policies. There is an organization out of the G8 Alliance that is now asking organizations to sign up and to commit to open data policies. Of course, initiate a centralized platform for data sharing. AfrEA is very passionate about that, and I hope it's going to come up in the panel discussions. Data quality, I've touched a little bit on that. Harmonization and standardization, that is key. Capacity building, that is very important. I know the global initiative, and some of you or most of you may know about this initiative, where they put money and they're planning to support national statistical offices as well as the ministries of agriculture in enhancing capacity, but it doesn't quite speak to data collection, so that's still another conversation back towards agriculture as well. So, funding statistics institutions, not just for data collection, but ensuring that these institutions have equipment, they have the latest software that they can use for data analysis. And of course, use of ICT, leveraging mobile technology, that would also be important, and encouraging institutions to adopt open data access platform. Or partner with other organizations, governments who advocate for regular data collection initiatives, develop centralized database on agriculture statistics, and of course for us, we share our data through our website and through publications like the one we released last year. So we are already doing something to contribute to what we're saying. That is putting money, something like that. And then, of course, we hope to influence policies and programs in the field of agriculture. This is just a graphical representation of what I just talked about. If we had data from all your programs or projects that you work in, national agriculture surveys and census, in a centralized place where people can access, this would be very powerful. We can be able to interrogate numbers like 65% of population are employed in agriculture. We would be able to say, yeah, this is correct. But right now, we'll take whatever numbers other people throw out there. And with that, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Questions?
Thank you very much, Jane. That is the agriculture data availability and the case studies of the African Agriculture Status Report that AfrEA went through. This is a case study. Therefore, what we are going to do is we are going to call a team of panelists for us to talk about some of the challenges that Jane has talked about here around data availability and accessibility, data quality, and also storage, and some of the funding and sources of data. So we are going to call here the former president of AgriA, Dr. Namanga Ngongi, who have worked in the area of agriculture for so many years before some of us were born. You know, he has been the deputy executive director for WFO and also the founding president of AgriA in the Green Revolution. Then we will call Mr. Dr. Elvis Fraser from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who have been very supportive to African agriculture and also to AfrEA. Most of the idea on African agriculture status reports, you know, was cooked in his office, and he has been a big supporter of our initiative on African agriculture data. We are going to call Miss Njuguna, who is in charge of our African agriculture status report. We are expecting Patricia. Is she in this room? No, she's not here, from USAID. And we were expecting Guy Grace, also from ADB, to join us here. But I think they are not here. Will you be able to come and represent USAID? Alphonse.
Well, but I am not probably the best person.
Okay.
Okay. I know more or less what's being done with the Future program.
Yes.
And I know we have also this experiencing the same challenges.
That is what we want you to come and help us to discuss.
Okay, sure.
Yes. So if you can come and So this is going to be a panel dialogue, you know, on the availability of African agricultural data, and they are going to share some of the issues, the challenges. They will not have the solutions, but they will be able to discuss with us the need for African agricultural data. So welcome to the panel. Alban, sorry for putting on the spot. You know,
I won't talk much. Just supporting the group.
yes. You know, if we did in this, yesterday we were doing a presentation and I said, some people didn't come. Some, you have something on your computer, can you come and put it on the board?
Yeah.
So we pulled him and, you know, his contribution was very helpful. So we are in this field and this is a daily issue that we face. I will start with Jay. Thank you for your presentation. But then I would like to ask you about the use of data in decision making. You know, I think AGRA is putting forward the African Agriculture Status Report, which is going to be an annual publication. And I know that the second part of the report is showing data, both macro and macro data, that you have talked about it. What is the main purpose of this comparison of this data, and what do you envision that having a platform of African agriculture data will help in decision making?
That's a very good question. Thank you. For our organization, having a centralized portal for data would be very, very important. Now, in my presentation, I described the journey that we had to go through. We had to travel in close to 10 countries trying to find data. Had we had a centralized place where, you know, it's a nice organized database, you just click the way you would the World Bank or FAO-Stat, that would make our world so much easier and we would be able to do more. We would save resources, we would save time. And of course that would be data that's already validated, it's quality data, so we don't have to spend time and money going out to look for data. And then it will be easier for management or policymakers to be able to use the data. It's available, it's there, and they know what it is being validated. So I think this is very, very important. And just given the fact that we will this year do the same thing again, travel to several countries trying to look for data, it is very, very important, and I think we should support it both by action, telling other people, being champions of data quality.
Dr. Namanga, I think you have been in policy making for a long time in agriculture. As a policy maker, as a global leader, and also as a leader of an institution, what do you think lack of relevant and reliable data, you know, in decision making, you know, how do you see it, and what are some of the challenges that you go through?
Thank you. First of all, congratulations on the African Agricultural Status Report. And that was a very good report. I was the last AGR, so I already congratulated you, but it's a good presentation. I would say that policy making without real reliable data is based on guesstimates, and that you really do not know whether you are moving forward or moving backward. Because in the future, you may have more reliable data and find that your starting point was further behind than you expected. So it is really critical that you should have good data. In the agricultural area, I'm now in Cameroon, I try to look for data during my own little conversations with other decision makers, but it's very difficult to have data. There has not been a census for 30 years. So
I thought it's 10 years, but I didn't know that it's
30
years.
Agricultural census in Cameroon is last 30 years has not been done. Of course, the data is collected by agricultural operators and the field agents of the government, but difficult even to access that data. So it is, you are really discussing and planning in the dark, and that I guess information is power. It keeps on being said. So I guess power, nobody wants to share information, or else you'll be sharing power also. So I say it lightly, but it's very costly. It's very costly to government, because you do not really know against what you are planning. So how would you say you are meeting the needs of your own population? How do you say you are making progress against food insecurity? how would you say that really we are reaching the communities, women are being empowered to do what? So clearly we do need, if you have to make a case, the case should be that there should be more, first of all, collection, storage, analysis, and dissemination of information as collected.
Elvis, I'm coming to you. I know that you are working with VMGF, and we are evaluation and monitoring officers. We talk about baseline a lot, and I think Bill and Melinda Gates have a good heart that Africa is poor, smallholder farmers are needed. On what basis are you guys making funding available to help Africa's smallholder farmers if we don't have data on where they are and where they need to be?
So thanks, first of all, let me say thanks for the opportunity to participate on this panel. And as many of you know,
Please, those at the back, we have some chair here. If you don't hear, can you come a little bit forward? Or you hear?
I'll try and project. The Gates Foundation and AGRA have been partners for since the inception of AGRA. And in that partnership, we have worked together on countless investments in agriculture, and also partnered with USAID and so on. As you know, the foundation programs now on an annual basis between $400 million and $500 million a year in agriculture. And it operates in a fairly elaborate agricultural strategy that targets smallholder farmers. Now, recently, we had a revisit of our strategic priorities with the primary purpose of being clearer about the targets that we want to achieve for the key outcomes, which is primary outcome of the strategy is increasing sustainable agricultural productivity for smallholder farmers. Now, their global strategy that was set of lifting, 170 million people out of poverty in sub-Saharan Africa. And honestly, the strategic priorities that were set, I must say, were based on models and assumptions rather than actual real data that we believe are current and credible. And so some of those assumptions, for instance, on adoption rates were grandiose. In some instances they assume up to 60% adoption rates for new varieties. And I don't think anywhere in any variety or any instance that 60% adoption rate has been achieved and maintained historically. And so that's just one instance where some of the assumptions that were made were basically guesses that weren't grounded in data. Now, just before I came to this conference, for the previous month, I was involved in trying to get better targets using the best data that we can find. The short answer to your question is, David, is right now the target setting and decision making has a huge gap in terms of being able to be grounded by real and valid and reliable data. And so we're doing our best to use multiple sources to triangulate figures as best we can.
Well, do you have anything to add, both on the using data for project planning and also for decision making from USA perspective?
From USA perspective, I think the challenges we're facing are the same as you are also experiencing other actors in this field are experiencing. But use of data, you can't use data that you don't have. It's got to be accessible, it's got to be available, accessible, and of good quality. And none of these aspects, as we are saying, are currently, strong. All these aspects are weak. So we have first to improve the data availability and accessibility and quality. But I did have a question for panelists though. I mean, when we talk about, for example, use of data for policy making, I know that in health, particularly, most countries produce an annual report, and that's statistical report. Okay, so I'm just wondering why ministries of agriculture don't do the same. What are the constraints? What are the constraints? Why do the ministries of health manage to produce, although late, an annual report? So it's just a question that I'm putting out there.
Yes, I think that was the same question I was going to throw to Jane. Based on their experience, I will take your questions. The question I was going to throw to you is that we all know that FAO have tried, or you go to FAO's site and they have tried to have agriculture data. The same question you had, that WHO collect those data. What was the issues that you saw in the FAO data? Because somebody was sitting down here said, oh, but if I go to FAO stats, I can get data. What was your experience on FAO data?
And it is true, FAO data exists, but most of that data is based on projections, and some is calculations, and they even put it at the bottom. There's a disclaimer. They tell you this is projections, these are assumptions, and whatever. So you have never had a FAO survey happening in the field. So we should ask ourselves where they get the data. But they say that they will tell you these are projections and these are calculations.
So yes, let me take your question. I know you have a burning question. Yes.
But first of all, let me thank you all, particularly Dr. Garbero, and nice to see you again. It's about 30 years experience. We've been with you for a long time in the field. Just not to be too long. What I would say and emphasize here is that donors who fund projects are very, very afraid of data that we want to collect, meaning that they don't plan for baseline studies. And if, as an expert, I've been managing projects and done that most of my life, you have to cheat to tell UNDP that they collect information for the project so you can have baseline data, even have your plan, and then monitor data on. You have to cheat like I did in Nigeria, I could put them data collection, and we collected data, surveys for 14 states, good data, and they didn't know until the end. And these were the most comprehensive data on poverty in Nigeria in 1996, 1997, including women, because we collected data in each household for women and for men. UNDP didn't know until the end. The same thing in Congo. The Belgian funded the project. Then everybody wants data, but they don't want to fund data collection at all. And then we have to cheat again. We have to conduct surveys, and we only tell them after we've done so. So we can no longer keep planning without data, without facts, as it used to be said in the 1960s. Now, donors were afraid they would tell you that surveys take too long to come back. You collect data, you process them, and so it takes 3 years. No, it's no longer the case. With all of the technology we now have, when data is collected, processing for a whole country, like even Nigeria, it could take just 1 month. And then you get the results. Now, speaking about FAO, you are right. Countries that work with the FAOs, what they send them to for the officials, that send them estimates. And annual productions, for instance, have been estimates. In Nigeria, we know that they didn't want to report cassava production for their own reasons. They didn't want the world to know they were producing enough of it. They didn't want to sell it to neighbors. What I was told. And so you get FAO data well, the best you can get. Yes. But what we do is we supplement this. When we go on food security mission with WFP and FAO, we go to the field and we get estimates. And these are good estimates because with agronomists, they will tell you that the area planted, meaning that with square meter, for instance, or 10 square meters, you do that in a particular region, you can get good estimates that are closer to production than anything you can get. And then you tell this data that you get on an ad hoc basis, you match that with these projections, then you get a pretty good idea of what the country is doing. Now, I hope that this workshop comes with a recommendation that African Development Bank, World Bank, UNDP, USAID, they fund data to production surveys, agricultural surveys, at least every 10 years for each African country. And African countries that have a lot of money, including in this region, Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, and so on, they should be encouraged to help to get the assistance needed, say from ECHO, to conduct their own agricultural surveys. Like every 5 years or every 10 years, they can do that. But policymakers, they like advice, but they don't want to get the data. For them, it doesn't matter. For us clinicians, it's so useful. So just the recommendations.
Thank you. I think we will go there. Let me take another question from the floor. I want to go to the back. Is there any question? I'm not seeing. Okay. Clara.
Thank you, Jane, for an excellent presentation. My question is to you and maybe all the other members of the panel. Is there a thought maybe to ride on the major surveys that will come in sub-Saharan Africa? For instance, I know in Kenya we have a census every 10 years.
You haven't had it for 30 years.
Well,
national census, okay.
In Kenya we have, every 10 years. We have household survey every so years. We have an economic survey every year. So is there a way maybe to ride on the big surveys and just put in a few indicators, even if we don't get everything, but just some indicators?
I think my question also
Yes.
is a follow-up. I think I want to bring this to the table for discussion. The African decision maker wears two caps. He's also a politician. Politicians there's pressure on them to produce short-term results to meet their political ambition. How the service involved cost, it will take longer. How can we, if we want them to put money in and use it will require packaging this service in a way that will meet the timelines of the decision maker. How can that be done? Else we always have this problem of decision in the time of action.
I think this is a question. What are some of the initiatives that is going on that maybe we can take advantage of it? And what are some of the timeline? I think I will leave this one to you.
In the case of USAID, specifically the Feed the Future program, which many of you are familiar with. I mean, we do surveys. We do baseline surveys. But these surveys obviously are in targeted areas. Those are multinational surveys. Okay? But we do baseline surveys. We have a contract who does those surveys for us. And these are pretty good surveys with highly reliable data. So maybe if there was a way to piggyback on those, perhaps partner with us to perhaps do a much larger survey that covers the whole country. Maybe that's feasible. That's what we do. For example, when we do health surveys in targeted areas,
DHS.
We piggyback onto the DHS.
Yes.
For example. Yes. So I think it's possible, but I think for USAID at least we are starting to be serious about it.
Okay, Dr. Namanga.
Thank you. It would be nice to piggyback, but we are also joining the politicians who want a short-term result, the initial discussions you had already here, having meetings with the parliamentarians, I think that's a good way to introduce the notions of what to do in the medium long term. Clearly, say here in Cameroon, this is the first year of a 5-year session. We were able to engage the agriculture committee here, and we should be able to put pressure on the Minister of Agriculture and government at large, the Minister of Planning, to be able to have an agricultural sense within this parliamentary period of 5 years. There's no reason why they cannot do that. On the initial question of the Minister of Health or the health statistics and agricultural statistics, clearly there's a big difference. That we all go to a health center, we all go, okay? So the correction of data is easy. How many farmers have ever gone to an agricultural So I mean, clearly it's a big difference. So you do need structures which go towards farmers, rather than farmers coming to the agricultural service centers.
Yeah. So, yeah, I just want to add a couple of points. One, I think there's a lot of data being collected.
Yes.
The problem is that it's not that agriculture data aren't being collected. Every NGO, everyone's doing work in agriculture is collecting data. The challenge is they collect their data, as Alphonse said, for their own specific purposes. They have their own definitions of what those indicators are. They have their own sampling frames and their own sort of catchment area and target populations. So you don't have a data set that is useful in many instances or even discoverable once they've used it for their own purposes. There's no repository, so you don't know that these surveys are being done. And so when you take a country like Tanzania and Ethiopia and so on and so forth, there are just all kinds of data. The issue comes back to, do you have the kind of data that can help to inform the kind of policy making that can really drive and the use of the resources that are happening on a large scale, right? And at the end of the day, governments are still the largest investors in agriculture for the most part. And if they don't have a database that they can control and that is focused on the kinds of priorities that they have, then you have an issue. So you have all these investments, but they don't add up to much because it doesn't really address the policy-making needs. And so, to the question that was raised, I think agriculture is mature enough to have its own. There's no reason why, especially now when there is more and more money being put into agriculture, that there should be very strong and very robust investment in agriculture data, coordinated approach. But first there needs to be a question of who has the responsibility to do that. It can't be left to splintered NGOs. It has to be, governments need to seize that responsibility and see it as a strategic importance to its decision making. So it's really from that standpoint now that we sort of start moving. Now, the good news is that there are many efforts to sort of add to that. The LSMS and the ISA, many of you are familiar with that, is a living standard survey that was being done by the World Bank first for non-agriculture households or non-agriculture focus. But there's been an added component to that. That's 50,000 household addition that focuses on capturing outcomes and indicators, data on agriculture, the ISA part of it. That has been supported by the foundation in partnership with the World Bank and with government. And so for about, and many organisms like that. So I think it's available now for seven countries with efforts on the way to expand it. It's now going into its second round of procurement of funding to not only continue those investments and so on. So there are other efforts are going on, and such as the LSMS.
Is there
can I respond to your question that she asked? So just in a nutshell, to respond to your question, yes, we have picked back the LSMS visa. We've given them questions that we would like included. So we're still following up on that. And also in the Kenya case, I know the budget survey was happening, I think, end of last year. They were working on their questionnaire. They sent it to us, and they wanted us to go through and see whether there are questions that we would like added. But they said we could only add 1 or 2. If we needed to do more than that, then we would have to fund or contribute to the funding. So it's a good suggestion. It's something that we'll continue talking to different national statistic offices to see where we can leverage.
Just one more addition to that. The agriculture is it's very diverse in terms of the kinds of areas and issues that you want. There's the livestock issues, and there's the crop specific issues, and then the agroecological zone differences and so on. So it needs its own focus. You can't really add 1 or 2 questions in this day and age to get at the kinds of outcomes, the multiple range of outcomes that are needed to really inform agriculture policy making.
Okay, Samir and then Emmanuel. Anybody at the back, please let me see your hands if you have a question. Otherwise, I'll be limiting it to people in front. So yes, I'll see. 1, 2, 3.
I think the challenge of the data, I just want to raise something that we discussed in Ethiopia recently. If you look at USAID, for example, it's doing a lot of work in Feed the Future programs. If you go to Malawi, a number of organizations are being funded through the Feed the Future programs. Recently, there was a big survey by AfrEA. AfrEA is working in Malawi. It's going to do a baseline, and a few other organizations are doing baselines in the same country in different regions. Now, if you look at the money that is being taken, used by different NGOs to do the baselines in that country, in different regions, if it was calculated very well, you will realize that money is enough to pull together and actually do a whole national survey for Malawi, for example. And I'm just wondering, could it be something that NGOs, donors could think about? The New Alliance countries, for example, where the focus of the Feed the Future is in. Every organization is going in doing baselines, and they're going to do the midterms and all that. Why can't we pull together this money? We know we're going to work there for the 10 years that has been targeted. Instead of us doing everyone going to that country and doing the survey, why can't it be done? And then we have the baseline for that country in agriculture for the next maybe 5 years, depending on how many. Because the money that is going in that country, I think it's almost enough. Now, if we take the 2 donors that are here, BMGF has its own focus countries as well. Some of those countries are also focus countries for Feed the Future. We're still doing the baselines. I think the money to do that, a whole national survey could be there. There could be other things, of course, politically and all those kind of things. But I think if we really had the will to do that, I really believe it's possible. It's something we raised in that meeting somewhere. I also wanted to raise something about the census of different countries. When you look at the Kenya census, the kind of questions that were asked, there were quite a number of agricultural questions that were asked in the census. But when you look at the report, most of that data is not there. So I think the question is, where does that data go? Is it about the analysis of the reports, or the data is normally not collected? I think those are the questions that we should go back.
You saw where the questionnaires were packed on the papers?
That was not clear, right?
I don't know if this is outside the scope of what we're discussing now, because the topic we're discussing is the challenges of accessing agricultural data in these countries, and according to Jane, these countries that were visited, they didn't have the data. But then, if we went an extra mile and found out, why is it that they don't do that? Why is it that this data is not collected? Because I think that's where we're missing the point, because, look, it's not there, but why is it not there? Is it due to underfunding? Is it due to the fact that it's not a priority? Or is it just a share negligence? I think that's an area that we need to find out, because, as you are saying, agriculture data is very important for decision making. And that's, I'm sure everybody knows, including the president and the minister. But why is it that it's not done? So we need to explore more on that, and based on that, you can see we need to partner better with these governments so that they can collect this information. Rather than just saying, okay, data is not there, but why is it not there? That's an area which I thought perhaps may be outside the scope, but which is very important for us to explore.
I will leave it the panelists to reflect on the issues that we have discussed, and then I will take another question. So let me start.
Yeah, so I think you're raising a very good point. Why is data not there? Why is it not available? But another question, which again surfaces from your question is, how are decisions being made? Because there are decisions that are being made. On what basis are those decisions being made? Because as one said, there's evidence-based decision making, but then there's also the political agenda, and sometimes these two clash. My suspicion is that if decisions are being made, they are being made based on something. What is that something?
Okay. Yes. Let me look at it.
Thank you. Just to come back to this fact that data are not available yesterday. This is just because agriculture has been neglected in Africa for a very, very long time. Agriculture has not been seen as a motor for development and engine of development. And so very little money is being put to agriculture. Cameroon, for instance, its budget for agriculture does not have the amount of 2%. Some countries have understood. Rwanda is one of them. You can list a few countries that have wished to be 10%. 10%. And we will tell you that the fast track to achieving Millennium Development Goal number 1 and 3 and so on is agriculture. You can do that in 4 years, not 2 days. Take Liberia. Women are making big strides after such a protracted conflict. They are making big strides after 2 years. So it's because policymakers never understood that the fast track to development is agriculture for most African countries. It's not oil, it's not minerals. So that we advisors, we have to keep just harmony, the idea that we want to move fast, we don't want rebellions. Please put a lot of money in agriculture and we'll be safe. Now, about coordination, we're talking about all these different surveys conducted by the NGOs. Some countries and some projects were aware of it, like DRC Congo, AfrEA, and Jonas, to try to set up ministries, general databases. Again, you need to train people, you need to do them. Unfortunately, these projects are happening, are being undertaken in countries that don't have money even to pay their own civil service.
Yes.
In places like Cameroon where they can still pay their civil service, they don't do that. So that it is possible that it's the ministry that has to take the leadership. And they have to have their own people. And they can even ask each donor to please provide some computers, please provide some training. They will be willing to do so if they can see the impact of the actions running. So that we did that in Congo. I was wondering if we can set up a database with the main indicators. We can tell each ONG that we're going to conduct a data survey, but these are some of the indicators that we are going to be ready. The project is so simple to define anyway. And if you define a project, you get basically for the project, that can be harmonized and you get useful data, general database. And that can be quite achievable. Except that politicians, somebody said, I don't know.
I have about 10 minutes to finish. Will you be able to throw light on some of the global initiatives and the next stage that we are working on to take it on coordination?
Yeah, as Jim has mentioned in her presentation, there's a global initiative that is led by FAO, African Development Bank, and the United Nations to build the capacity of the National Bureau of Statistics in Agriculture. They have done a survey in Africa
to assess the capacity of the National Bureau of Statistics that works on agricultural data. And they came up with some ranking in different areas, human capacity, financial capacity, technical capacity, and so on. And they had a meeting in Rabat. David and I, we participated in the meeting. And you can see that most of the African countries do not have the financial capacity. They put a little money in data collection. They have a very low technical capacity when it comes to data collection and data analysis. So that's why when we travel to these countries, we can see that in many countries, they don't collect the data. Where the data are collected, they are not analyzed. The data is still stated in the paper or they have been entered but not analyzed. In some of the countries, they ask us to pay for the data analysis because they have been having this data for 2 years and nobody is thinking about analyzing the data. So the global initiative wants to identify the area of weaknesses of these different National Bureau of Statistics and design programs to build the capacity of those National Bureau of Statistics. That's one. Second, they have come up with harmonized data collection tools. Because what came up during even our visit in these countries, you can see for the same indicator, for example, within the same country, from one survey to another one, the data was collected in different ways. So it's very difficult even to compare within the same country the change in the indicator over time. That's one thing. And from one country to another one, they have different definitions for almost the same indicator. So what they have done is a good job. They have harmonized, they have come up with some core indicators in agriculture. These are the core indicators that at least if you are spending money to do a survey in agriculture, you should collect data on. That's one thing. They have come up with a harmonized data collection tool. That's the other thing that they have come up with. And I think the next stage will be to share these tools with the National Bureau of Statistics in different countries and design programs to build the capacity of this National Bureau of Statistics. Now, David and I, we went there and we had this concern that, yes, it's not only the government that should be collecting data, and that is collecting data. You have these NGOs, the donor funding project that have been collecting baseline, endline, midline surveys. But there's nowhere you can have a centralized platform where you can find this data. USAID, it's a requirement for all the projects to collect baseline survey 6 months after they have given you money. But there's no centralized place within a country where you can find this data. And we throw this idea to the African Development Bank and FAO to come up with something that is where we can have all the data that are collected by the different stakeholders that are playing in agriculture in Africa. At least we'll have the baseline and endline surveys that are collected by these donors in specific areas. So when you go to Cameroon, for example, in the northern area, let's say Feed the Future has collected the data on that area. If you are doing the same project, if you are doing a project in that area, and we need to know the baseline for one indicator, you don't have to collect the same survey again. The data is already available. You know, we also discussed that the idea that you suggested. In the same country, you have many donors that are collecting data at the same time. Why not putting this money in the same pot and do a national survey, agricultural survey? Okay? USAID might be interested only in the northern Cameroon. We can oversample there during the survey. Okay? BMGF might be interested only in the southern part of Cameroon. We can oversample that. But overall, we can come with a national representative data for the country. And that was the idea we want to take forward, coordinating the data collection in the country among the key players and having a platform where the data that are available on agriculture can be shared and accessed.
So those are some of the things that are in the planning stage. In March, we are discussing it with BMGF, and these are some of the things. But, you know, let me take Dr. Namanga and then I come to Affairs.
Okay. I think that's great to have such development, but one caveat. The donor community should not substitute itself for the national institutions. The collection of data analysis should be anchored into national institutions. So whatever is being done should be done in collaboration with national institutions. Because in the end, they have the responsibility for coordination. Okay, that's my first comment. The second is the question on why are these things not collected, whether it's money, whether it is the lack of will, or in my view, probably it's more of a fear factor. In Cameroon, I can put my hand on it that we have a lot of information available. And probably it has been analyzed, but not released. That you find that a lot of our information has been collected and analyzed, and everybody wants to have an official data before they can tell you or answer your question. Okay? It's much more, in my view, it's more of a fear factor of what will be revealed than the cost of doing it. Because you don't have agricultural posts all over the country. There are technical all over in villages. You cannot tell me they don't have the information. They do. But you cannot get access to the information. Do you have a different experience?
Not even on official AFP missions.
Yes.
You have to get authorization from the minister because the official, they don't can release a piece of information.
It is so there must be a fear factor of what will be revealed by information or what information will be used for. Rather than that, it does not exist. My conclusion is that if you go into a room of 100 well-informed people, you'll find probably 50 of them have not gone to a medical doctor for the last 5 years.
Yes.
Why? Because they don't want to know what the
I just wanted to say that Feed the Future data is going to be public. There is now a mandate from the government, the U.S. government, the Open Data Initiative. So the Feed the Future data sets will be publicly available.
I know, and we have access to that one. We have access to the Ghana one. So that one, and they are part of the USAID is part of the Golden Initiative. That is part of the Global Alliance for open access to data. Elvis, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I want to second Dr. Ngongi's point. I think donors can't replace the government's role in establishing data systems that inform policy. While these partnerships with donors are important and strategic in moving things forward, governments really need to step up and really work on it. So those efforts that you've mentioned, those partnerships that are happening, I think it's the right direction, and I'm excited there are other kinds of partnerships that are going on to solve the problem. However, there's still remaining obstacles within the government. One, the will to do it, and the openness to embrace data. I think there's still an issue with getting transparency. And then in some of the instances I've seen in certain countries, there is conflict between the Ministry of Agriculture and the Central Statistical Agency for power in terms of who has the right to do it. And because of that stalemate, they haven't really made a decision. So they're fighting amongst themselves on who should control agriculture data. That's silly. Data is data. It should be available and anyone can access it. When you have those petty quarrels going on and the lack of will that remains barriers, it's not from lack of funding and partnership. There's fundamental concerns that we must address.
In your last word.
Just to address Emmanuel's question, in some cases, it is lack of having proper priorities and the goodwill. To give a good example, in Kenya there is a lot of talk about agriculture. Every day in the news there is something about agriculture. But what do? Farmers say we don't have fertilizer, so they get them, they buy fertilizer and give it to them if it ever gets there. So if the government, and I agree with the panelists, if the government have the goodwill, they deliberately plan for funding data collection in agriculture or supporting those initiatives, this would go a long way. The time that you talk about the Maputo Declaration, yes, there is money that the government set aside, but it is not, it doesn't go to data collection or anything of that nature. So if we had champions, people who are actually advocating and pushing the government and the ministries in that direction, I think there will be.
Thank you very much. I think this is the issue on African agriculture data. We all have a role to play, you know, in our interaction, in our work, to be able to make data available. We are evaluators, and you will never be able to do a good evaluation if you don't have the data. You know, when we were putting this thing on the agenda, we said that one of the key principles of doing a good evaluation is availability of data. And I think these are the issues when it comes to agriculture and food security. Data availability is very crucial. Let us play our role as evaluators. Let us talk about it, act on it, push it, so that our national governments and our donors will be able to embrace data quality, data accessibility, and also data reliability. If we are able to do this, we will be able to help policymakers to make good decisions that are affecting about 65% of the rural population who are engaged in agriculture. Thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you, the panelists, for contributing this discussion. We are working on it, and we know that at any time when we call you, your knowledge and experience will support us in this area. Thank you very much.